Hi there. So we are beginning to open up our church buildings in this area. Now it's a source of great joy that we're able to do so, but unfortunately we're not able to do so nearly as quickly as we would like to. It's a strange season, isn't it? Because we have our churches like this one here in Birtle closed for the last few months because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And for that very same reason, our reopening can only be slow and measured and with all due precautions. So even when you come into one of our churches over the next few weeks, it'll look and feel quite a bit different. So first, let me explain what we're going to be doing on Sunday mornings. Now, our main service is going to continue to be our informal worship at 10:30, delivered via the Zoom platform. This has been a consistently well supported service, and there's no point in ditching that unless and until we can move into actual church buildings and have live worship with live congregations. At 9 o'clock on every Sunday over the next few weeks, we will have a communion service somewhere. Now these will be our first services, regular Sunday services in church buildings since the start of the lockdown. Let me explain a little bit about what that's going to look like. As you enter our church buildings, you'll realise that through our notices everywhere, this is the kind of thing that it will be offering guidelines as to how to keep safe and hygienic throughout our church services. And this is about protecting yourself and protecting all our other visitors and volunteers in our churches. So I really would be most grateful if all those who come would be able to abide by the notices that we put up about hygiene. Now, I'm delighted that we're able to do services in our church buildings in the weeks ahead. You know, although the Zoom informals work really well for lots of people, it doesn't work for everyone, and I'm delighted that we can begin to cater for those who prefer a more formal and more structured type of liturgy. And the reality is that communion is a really essential part of Christian worship. So I'm really pleased that we're able to begin to offer that again. Now, the way that the churches will look is going to be a little bit different. I'm here in Birtle Church, and as with all our churches, there will be sanitisers placed near entrances and exits if they're different. And this is all part of doing things in a way that emphasises the health and hygiene of all our visitors and all of our volunteers as well. You'll also notice that you won't be able to sit in just any pew. Some of the pews, like this one here, are taped off, like this one here. And that, of course, is just to make sure that we can maintain social distancing, which is one of the key parts of the hygiene regulations for COVID-19. One thing I really hope is that even though we have all these hygiene regulations in place that will make the church building feel a little bit different, I hope that when you come, you'll still find it to be a prayerful space that will enable you to worship God and to be able to feel that you can really connect with Him through our services in our church buildings. Now, the third thing that we're hoping to do is to offer outdoor worship, maybe once every couple of weeks during July and August. Now, we're hoping to start this on July the 12th at Catcott Birtle Farm, which is the home of Richard and Rosemary Tucker. They have a large barn that's open-sided, which is a perfect venue because it's both outdoors and also with shelter if we end up with bad weather. But I think it is worth saying that Being able to do outdoor worship is going to depend upon two things. The first is that we actually get the green light from the diocese in terms of doing worship, and ultimately that comes from the government. And that's in regard to having a sizable congregation outdoors, and also being able to do singing and blowing into wind instruments and things like that. That's one big if that we need to be sure of, first of all. And the second thing is that in several of our potential outdoor venues, it really will have to be weather dependent, so that we'll end up taking a decision maybe a couple of days in advance to confirm or otherwise as to whether the weather will be suitable for us to do the outdoor worship on a particular Sunday afternoon. Nevertheless, I hope that that will be an additional part of the way we worship, that will be another encouragement, another way of connecting with God in a slightly different environment. Throughout what we do, our big emphasis is on making sure that everything is done in a safe and hygienic way that protects all our visitors and all of our volunteers. And so please be assured that all of our churches are carefully following the instructions given by the Church of England, doing risk assessments and so on, just to make sure that we do have a safe environment. I think one thing that's come to my mind is that paradoxically, this lockdown has managed to emphasise both the importance and the unimportance of church buildings. Let me deal with the unimportance first of all. We have learned that we can indeed do worship without a church building. We can do it across Zoom. It's quite effective. It may not be as good as meeting in an actual church building, but it's still pretty good. And we realised that if we needed to, we could carry on doing that. We could be more creative. Or if we were able to meet in public but not have our church buildings, we could find other ways of meeting and worshipping God, irrespective of whether or not we have church buildings. I think it's really important. It's worth bearing in mind that there are many Christians in the world today who don't have the freedom to worship in church buildings. It was not too far from this country. If you think of the former Soviet Union, the countries of the Soviet Eastern Bloc, all countries that were governed by militant, atheist, Marxist rulers who were very much anti-religion. And so the church continued to survive despite the lack of church buildings. And that's a story across the world, that even where church buildings are unavailable, the church continues to survive and in some cases even thrive despite the persecution that Christians are under. Nevertheless, I think the lockdown has emphasised the importance of church buildings because of the fact we haven't been able to access them. Normally, in a time of national crisis, the church buildings, we'd want them to be right at the heart of village life. We'd want them to be focal points where people can come and pray and meet with God, pour out their concerns to God. And yet, like everything else in this country, we've had to lock our doors. It's a very painful and awkward and odd reality that we've all had to live through. Now at last we can begin that reopening process. It is worth remembering exactly what meeting in church is all about. It is a place where Christians can meet together and worship God and have fellowship together for enabling a richer worship, richer relationship with God by having that communal dimension. It's really important. It's something that Jesus himself emphasised. The fact that we do worship together and not in isolation. But another reason why we want to have our churches open is so that anybody can come in and to be able to connect with God while they're there. The ancient Celtic Christians used to describe places as being thin places where there appeared to be, where the veil between earth and heaven appeared to be especially thin. Now, many churches are thin places, not all. There are also many places that are not church buildings that are thin places. One of my favourite places is Faldy Brennan, a retreat centre in Pembrokeshire, and there's a high cross, which is a rough cross on an outcrop on the side of a hill, which has a stunning view. And I'd heard that was a thin place and was really sceptical until I went there and experienced the atmosphere there and felt this really is a thin place where we can indeed feel closer to heaven and closer to God. And when we have those thin places, we really need to treasure them. And it's my hope that our churches are and will be thin places. Now, I'm not entirely sure what it is that makes one church a thin place and not another. I think it's probably due to the prayer life that takes place within a church building. The praying of faithful people over the years, over the centuries, I think is incredibly important for creating a spiritual atmosphere in a church building that other people can benefit from when they come into a church building. So I hope that as we begin slowly to reopen our church buildings, that this reopening will continue and develop so that we can, before too long, return to being open during normal daytime hours. It may yet be months rather than weeks, but that's our aim, to be able to be open during daytime hours. Meanwhile, I do hope that you'll be able to join me on Sunday morning, either at our Zoom service at 10:30 or for our communion service in Capcot at 9 o'clock. I really hope to see you there. Bye-bye.